Hi, and welcome to the Notepad Show. In today's episode, we're going to be going over how to do interior aggregate volumes. A little bit of a refresher. Let's bring up Houdini here. A little bit of a refresher. An aggregate volume is a volume that has, as according to Renderman, doesn't get seen as having any borders. So you might have a set of volumes that's like a cloudscape, as an example, and Renderman, as a renderer, does not see any border between the different volumes that happen to be in the scene. So that when light propagates, it propagates very efficiently, and light propagates and sees it as a single volume set. The other benefit of working with aggregate volumes is that you can have multiple sets, and that's what we're going to be going over today, and the power of having a second set or a second interior aggregate volume. And we're going to call it interior aggregate volume for this tutorial, and you'll see what I mean by that in a second. So I'm looking at a scene here where we have a ball. It's a crystal ball, and we have a volume. And everything's at pretty much its defaults as you would expect the volume to be in the crystal ball. And when I render, everything looks the way that you would expect it to look if you were doing a rendering like this. The volume is intersecting with this transmissive shader in the crystal ball, and if that's the kind of look you're going for, I don't know, you're going for a purplish glass moon kind of a look with, green clouds, knock yourself out. But there's some really interesting things you can do with interior volume aggregate. And I'm going to show you a video right now showing some of those cool things. So here you can see I am preventing the volume from propagating outside the transmissive material. I want to be very clear. It's not the geo that is controlling the fact that the volume is not exceeding its border. It's the shader applied to the geo that's doing that. So as you can see, it does not exceed the border, and it really allows you to have really cool effects. All right. So why don't we just get started and show you how to do it. It's really, really simple. It's going to be a very short video. So I'm going to turn off the stand-in, and I'm going to turn on the ball. It's a bigger crystal ball, that's all. And on the interior volume geo, this is the actual cloud, and this is the network. It's just two spheres with two different colors, CD attributes applied to them. They're merged together. I have a point velocity attached. I then transform it, plug it into a pyro source, which then plugs into a volume rasterization. And I plug in the attributes for that. These are all things you can. There's tons of tutorials on how to create a emissive volume in Houdini. That's not what this tutorial is about, but I'm just showing you for the sake of this video. And then I have it outputting to a VDB sequence. And then there's a simple out node. But it's just basically a volume geo. That's it. On this geo, and this is the important part, by default, the aggregate name is the one that is defaulted when you create your ROP in Renderman. It's called the Global Volume Aggregate. We are going to change this name to something unique. In this case, Interior Volume Aggregate. I just like to use that name. It can really be any name you want it to be, but the important part is there are two places where we need to do this. All the other things that control the look of a volume are still the same. There's no difference in how these settings are treated when you're doing the interior volume aggregate, in this case, the secondary aggregate. But we want to make sure that this name right here, and I'm going to copy with Control C, I'm going to copy this name here. And there's a second place we have to put it. And I alluded to that in the beginning of this video. You have to put it on the glass shader, the transmissive material that the sphere is, that's applied to the sphere. So you go to the glass lobe in your PXR surface, you go to the interior section, you turn on volume aggregate, and then you give it the exact same name. So you're pairing it to what the geo name was, the volume geo aggregate was. Okay. Now, this is not for confusion, but to just show that certain things have changed a little bit in Renderman. It used to be that if you wanted to control visibility of a secondary aggregate, you would do what's called an override. You do not need to do that anymore. By the way, this name is always defaulted to global volume aggregate. It's how it is when you create the ROP. You don't want to play with this. But here you used to control, and you would put the secondary name here as well. You do not need to do that anymore. This is a holdover from a previous workflow. And Renderman 20, I don't know when it happened, but at least in 26.3, you do not need to use the override. The beauty is you can control some of the visibilities right here. So these checkboxes can now be utilized. They weren't able to be utilized before, but now they can. Okay. And that's it. That's all there is to it. So you match up again, not to beat a dead horse, but I want to make sure you understand. You create a unique aggregate name here for the volume, and then create a unique name on the shader that you want the volume to be contained in. In this case, clear glass. And we have to turn on volume aggregate and put the interior aggregate here. These settings here are just like they're the same kind of settings that you would use when you create clouds. So there are things you can do here as well for look dev. Okay. Pretty simple, really simple stuff. And when I render, the volume's going to be inside. It's a little bit, I'm going to be honest with you, I got to go a little bit further into the animation to show it. And there we go. Now I'm controlling the intensity of the volume, the color of the volume. I'm using a light to do that with light linking. So I have a light linking that's being done on this volume light driver. It's just the name I gave it. And I'm only affecting the volume geo. So I can make it really intense or not, depending on what it's just something I did for this shot. Okay. All right. And that's it. That's really all there is to it, depending on what your scene is. I have just a simple cyc wall. That's it. So I'm going to bring up another scene where I've done the same thing. And I did it in honor of the WWDC 26 that Apple's doing this week. Just for fun. But I did want to show you kind of neat node. It's called the trace node. And this allows you to bring in a PNG file and use that PNG file to create, some curves that can then be extruded. I'm scaling up. All right. Convert it to a VDB, an SDF VDB. And then I do an SDF smooth. I do this with a lot of my logos or things that I'm trying to convert. A logo I'm trying to convert to 3D. And if you look really close, it's a really dense mesh. So I'm going to go into the quad remesher and reduce the polygons. So we did that. And let me show you what that looks like. This is just an added bonus. Just check out the trace node. You can look at the documentation on Houdini's website to really see the kind of cool stuff you can do with it. And here's sort of the final product. Same effect as the crystal ball. The key is I'm using a transmissive material. Okay? And that's it. I hope that this was a useful episode and that it will get your creative juices going and creating some really cool motion graphics stuff. And it can be used for a lot of different things. And have a great week. Talk to you soon.